chakra development. So you want to get out in the world and see what's going on with people's third chakras.
Well, that's not. I'm wanting to get out. I want to go interact with people that perhaps are more, as far as context and schemas and stuff, kind of your standard simplified schema. Waking up and growing up, if us, which of course there's different aspects of waking up and whatever, but if we just say waking up is becoming more aware from that conscious awareness perspective and some sense of that as an actual thing that is not a thing, it's a presence, blah, blah, blah. But if you say that as a thing and an awareness that even though like I'm aware of that as a thing and the information that has been downloaded, if you will, from that into my cognitive and or ego sense of self, the awareness, the intuitive sense is, oh, that's my actual self. In the same way that I'm aware of my hand and it's my hand and I have the subjective experience of it and whatever, but I also am aware beyond it. I'm aware that if you cut my hand off, I'll be quite upset, but that myself will still be here while my hand will be gone.
Yeah.
And there's this sense, not just conceptual understanding, but this literal sense that's different than it was until I was in my 20s. That if you take this cognitive mental understanding and idea of a me and cut it off and throw it away, same as with my hand, I will still be here. I will still exist. This sense of self, this awareness that's looking at my hand, it's similar. I'm looking at this in the same kind of way. And while, yes, I can do embodied, I can feel an embodiment in my hand, and you could, and it kind of feels like, and there's this little me that's in my hand, similar to if you put on a glove, and you're looking at the glove, but you're like, yeah, but I'm in there, because your hand's in there, and you're like, so don't, be careful with that glove because I'm in there.
Yeah.
Versus pull your hand out of the glove, it's like, okay, now it doesn't matter what happens to the glove. I'm in here, and I'm in here, but I'm aware that it's like the glove. It's like it just feels like I'm in there. I got this glove on, but I can also do this. And now I feel much more like I pulled the glove off and I'm looking at the glove. I'm looking at this now.
Yeah.
And I feel a sense of presence, and that me-ness is out here much more, and I'm less in this.
Huh.
And that feels fine. It feels like a relief in a certain way.
Yeah. Less to display.
Yeah. But I'm also aware that, well, I'm less I'm less embodied, just like I'm not embodying the glove. I'm not embodying this part of my mind the way I was a minute ago.
Yeah.
So if awakened is some aspect of awareness beyond just being trapped in here, and if that awareness is that non-dual and or that essential presence consciousness type of experience, it's like, well, I have some degree of that. Or if we said everyone has some degree of it, I have a large degree of it.
Mm-hmm.
Which again is probably like 1/1,000,000% of the total,
Yeah.
So there's that. And so then like when I interact with you, then it's, oh, so does he, and then there's a way that feels good. It feels, and it's not like, oh, good, because my presence was so lonely, it's
like, oh, look at that.
Yeah. But the connection between my conscious presence and my mind, for example, my mind was lonely, and my mind sees that, oh, and your mind is connected to your presence. And so then on a mind level, hey, you and I get to, you know, look and see that, hey, there's another person over there that's like, you know, to some degree aware in that same way. And so my mind likes that. My mind wants that connection. My mind needs others.
Yeah.
In that way. And I'd like to meet someone that was, I don't know, you look at pictures and like maybe Maharshi or maybe Aurobindo or maybe anyway, there's
Maharaji. Maybe that's just the name, but like Ram Dass's got the.
No.
Okay.
He was from back more like 1800s.
Oh, okay.
There's a certain little video clip of Maharshi and that guy. Maharshi's sitting on a bench and that guy's standing near him. The reason I was bringing it up is from what I see in photos and or little videos that I've seen, my sense is if I was, you know, physically in their presence, I would be wowed by the intensity of that.
Yeah.
Because I'm a little bit wowed just watching the video.
Yeah.
And I don't see that in general.
Yeah.
So I would, but I'm guessing they're out there. You know, there and I don't know. Maybe there's something to this idea that those guys they're not writing bestsellers and doing a book tour. You know.
Yeah, totally.
But so there's that.
It's almost like we congregate that around that in different ways than we used to.
Yes.
So it's like we don't know what that looks like anymore.
Yeah, good point.
It's also the whole idea that like the next Buddha will be a Sangha.
What does that mean?
It's like instead of it's a community. So Sangha is like a congregation.
Okay.
So there's like the Sangha, which is like everyone.
Okay.
And there's also like the idea that there won't be a person who's enlightened. There'll be a community of people together that are enlightened. It makes me think about like different groups of artists in different places throughout time and how like within a city, this whole like movement would happen just because the people there were all talking about the same things. So that something like that, like where are those, something I'm always curious about is like, where are those arising?
Yeah.
But so yeah, that's when you just gotta like stumble into it, I think. I don't know. Because it's also like there's always some countercultural aspect to it. So that right now would be like it's not online, you know.
Yeah. I'm wanting to say political stuff.
Just get your jabs in. Like,
yeah.
You're allowed if you want to.
It seems like 20, 30 years ago, you used to hear that San Francisco is the next.
Yeah, I feel like it already happened. San Francisco is
it's already come and gone, right?
Yeah, San Francisco is a joke now.
Yeah. I mean, that's what you hear, that it's just in trouble. And I was going to joke and say I don't think it's Portland or Seattle, but
yeah, I don't think so either.
And it doesn't seem like Chicago. But the Portland Seattle thing that seems to be this movement that's happening there seems on one end of the spectrum. The stuff, the Chicago just seems like it's regressed into. I don't know that there's a movement happening in Chicago. It's just a regression. Yeah. But that experience of awakening, and then going back to the schema, it's like, and or another thing for me is like, you know, certainly first chakra, it's like, wow, I just love, in the same way that you look at a, you know, if you get near a horse in real life and it's just like, my God, this creature is so physically present and like awesome, you know?
Yeah.
And in addition to they might look beautiful, and in addition to, wow, they're so powerful or they can run so fast, there's just an energetic presence.
Totally.
That's awesome. And then, you know, you look at certain humans and they're much more that way than others. And I remember just getting around certain professional athletes, for example, or like I went and watched a track race where Carl Lewis was in it and Dennis Johnson was in it, and these were a few of the literally the fastest humans that have ever lived, you know?
Yeah.
And it was like the energetic presence and whatever felt like standing by a horse. You know what I mean? Like they just had that.
Yeah.
And it just was awesome. I was it was like, man, what would it feel like to be that?
Right.
And then, of course, you know, the idea that seems to say absolutely zero about what they might be like in their second chakra or third chakra or fourth, you know.
Right.
And vice versa. Someone might have this awesome. I mean, to some level, I think the way Ken Wilber lays it out, that there's a certain amount of development you got to do at this level in order to have development at this level, but only to an extent.
Yeah.
But so anyway, to get around, I think for a lot of people like Marlon Brando, there was a certain way that he was just intensely, massively present in a way that was largely, if I had to just say, I'd say it was largely emotional.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the guy was just, you know, emotionally, it felt that same way as the horse physically. It just like this emotional, you know, and I never saw him in person, but that's the sense I get, is just that you know, if you measured like whatever the measurement would be for the intensity of a field.
Yeah.
I think there's an intensity measurement.
Okay. The concept makes sense, but I don't know.
Okay. Like I think he had his intensity, I think, was probably off the charts. Or the depth or the whatever of it. And then I'm saying on this third chakra level, you know, people that come to mind, and intensity is not necessarily the right word, because it's not just about amplitude or charge. There's something more, because what I'm really talking about is like maturity.
Yeah.
You know, there's a certain, there's just charge, but then there's the individuation idea and the idea that there's a maturing that can happen in a chakra, where the person's sense of self, you know, has gone through these phases, and so you have this energetic vibe, this energetic presence it's
almost like there's more potential. It's like the depth is like kind of like a range. Like there's when two people talk like an actor having range, like Brando having range, it's like the potential for all of that emotion is there because the depth is there. So it's like there's like a pull to that. There's like you said, like an intensity to it.
Yeah. And then that kind of paradoxical thing that simultaneously that the person, in order for that development and maturity to happen, the person can't be, at a certain point, the person can't be identified there, because the identification with that chakra prevents the further development,
Yeah.
Not dissociated, but
Yeah.
that chakra has become object in their awareness. And but so, again, just in general, it's like I was saying, you look at movies, and I think that a Robert Redford and a Paul Newman and if you go further back, a Humphrey Bogart, a Clark Gable, there was more third chakra. They were more third chakra individuated and developed. And I think that the societal norms at that time there were more structures and more mirroring and more, that part of the energetics is what a person spent their time in, right?
Yeah.
And it's not like there's none now. Even like if you go so younger than those guys, for example, a Tom Selleck, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like Tom Selleck also had very, very, I would say he was very third chakra oriented, very mature, individuated as this third chakra self. You shift into a Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, Johnny Depp, who I think are great in their ways, whatever, fun to watch them, whatever. But like those guys are children on the third chakra level compared to those other names I mentioned.
Mm.
That's just what it seems like to me.
Yeah.
Now, again, those three guys, maybe they're aware on a level that's higher than those other guys. But I'm saying on that third chakra level, I think they grew up like me in a world where the third chakra dimension is not where they lived. And so, for example, if you live where you got to walk to school versus where you take the bus, you're going to develop certain parts of your energy field because you're walking to school that the person that takes the bus isn't going to develop, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be just like on the physical level. It's like, well, your legs are going to be a little more, whatever, strong. You're going to have a little more stamina and whatever, because you've developed in this certain way. If you grow up where you got to fight with your fists, you're going to be developed and have skills to fight with your fists in a way that someone who's never been in a fight just doesn't even know how to do.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that dimensionally, it works this way. And I think I've described to you before that the profound experience I had where, it's like I've always seen dimensions in a certain way, and but didn't know what the hell I was seeing, but I remember just this idea that when you're in three-dimensional space, like right now we're in virtual reality, right? Like you and I are kind of allowing ourselves to be in virtual reality.
Yeah.
And it's easy. We just go into it. But it's a perceptual shift.
Yeah.
And obviously, we can do both at the same time. You can still drink your coffee and you don't spill it because, but this idea of putting
the coffee's not in virtual reality.
Right. But if you had on, virtual reality glasses, that impaired your, vision in 3D, you might spill your coffee because you can't even see it. You got to feel around for it on your desk because you got these glasses on, right?
Yeah.
And I'm saying that, okay, we're able to do those virtual reality glasses with each other and be aware in 3D at the same time. But if you took someone that had never been exposed to virtual reality, they'd be so anchored, in 3D space, and then they'd be looking at this screen and they wouldn't go into it, right?
Yeah.
It would remain more this image on this flat screen that's like, what the hell's going on there?
Yeah.
And I'm saying that let's just say, just to hugely generalize, Gen X especially grew up in the TV and in the movie screen.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever we felt, oh my God, I'm alone in 3D space, instead of developing over years and years a tolerance, an awareness, and an energetic like field that locates us in three-dimensional space, and that we find solid ground and we can handle that, we start to become aware of that, and it's like, fuck that, I'm turning the TV on and I'm going in there.
Mm. Yeah.
And I notice it in myself. I notice that I'm going to turn the TV on, and it's like, why am I, and there's an awareness, there's a difference between, oh, I want to watch a certain program.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to escape something.
Yeah.
And I'll be aware, like, oh yeah. And then sometimes I'll just wait and I'll be like, no, just, can you do 5 minutes of this and then turn the TV on?
Right.
And it becomes, the more consciously aware of being physically separate in that third chakra way, it becomes quite frightening.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying that Robert Redford and Paul Newman, let alone Clark Gable and Humphrey Bogart, let alone the further back you go, they didn't have virtual reality to escape into. And they were forced to spend more time facing that.
Yeah.
And I think they developed their third chakra more than those of us that have spent our time. We've spent way more time up here in a virtual mental cognitive reality.
Yeah.
As if we've walked around with virtual reality glasses over our eyes the whole time.
Yeah.
And that's the state of the world right now. And I think, and there's all kinds of ways that's like really, really bad, really, really dangerous, really, really causes anxiety and depression. And it makes us ideologues, and it makes us out of touch with our personal selves, and makes us out of touch, in all these different ways. In a similar kind of way that not growing your own food and not knowing how to build your own shelter and not knowing blah, 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 just expecting it all to be provided for you at the grocery store. And it separates us from nature, and it separates us from our first chakras, and it separates us from an understanding of what it actually takes to put food on the table. And we don't even understand let alone growing your own food and hunting for your own food or something. But even just understanding that the capitalistic machine that is at work, and what is involved to put that food in the grocery store. Mm-hmm. Like we just kind of don't even, you just expect it. And then when something weird happens, like COVID or something, and suddenly there's some empty space on some of the shelves at the store, or it's like, holy fuck, what's going on?
Yeah.
So I think in a similar way that we're out of touch in our first chakras, we've lost touch with nature to a degree, we've lost touch with our first chakras. We've also done that on a third chakra level. We're now just expecting the third chakra thing to be what it is, and but we're not mature there. We all think I've transcended third, like these guys back then, the orange level, basically, right? The orange level, like we're past that. That was when everyone was selfish, and that was about capitalism and colonialism and modernism, and we're past that now. And now we want equality, and now we want, and it's like, we're not understanding that if you take that level out, it crashes down into fucking beige.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of rambling, but I'm just saying that I think there's a huge misunderstanding that, like, even in the third chakra level, we're a bunch of fucking junior high kids at best on our third chakra levels. And we're acting like we're fucking, like we've transcended the third. We have in a certain way, but we're acting like we're doing a pre-trans fallacy in a bad way.
Yeah.
And so back to the guru schema thing. It's like, yeah, I feel, at certain times I'll notice, wow, that that person's third chakra is really developed, and every once in a while in person with someone, I'll feel like I'm sitting with a third chakra guru.
Yeah.
In the same way that if I'm sitting with a horse, or they're a first chakra guru.
Yeah. They're easier to find than you thought.
Yeah.
Let's go to the dog park.
Yeah. So I'd love to sit with more third chakra gurus. I'd love to, interact with more fourth chakra gurus. I'd love to go see this Mother Amachi, see what that's about.
Yeah.
She used to be, this big fourth chakra presence.
My cousin's a big fan of hers.
Yeah.
A devotee, yeah.
Okay. And is heart chakra kind of the...
That's funny. Like, I haven't talked to my cousin about it in years. I think since I've had any increased understanding or idea of it. So it'd be good to ask her. But from what, yeah, definitely what she's always described it as far as like the overwhelmingness of the presence, I think is in line with what you're talking about. There's a depth there that she doesn't experience other places.
What's involved then in being a devotee? Is she,
I think she'd probably just like,
go ahead.
Yeah, I think she contributes, like she has like a foundation or whatever, and then she just goes and sees her at least once a year. I think sometimes a couple times a year.
Sweet. Yeah, I'd like to go check it out. Check her out,
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I don't know what's beyond that. I'd like to. It's just something I'd like to explore. What's it like to go sit with Amachi? What's it like to sit with some of these other people that are?
I guess like as an analogy, like what? So when you go to your first chakra horse guru, like what do you learn about the first chakra, right? Like what do you bring back from that? So and then if you're going to go and like see Amachi or see like what. Obviously you're talking about like that kind of like presence within that chakra that you aren't, you don't get to experience normally. What kind of does that inform, or what does that change in you?
Yeah, good question. And just to be clear, as far as guru, to say that the horse is a first chakra guru, there's a way that can be true, but also I don't think the horse is having reflective awareness of their first chakra the way that, but I'm saying that I think ideally a human, like Carl Lewis, for example, it felt like he was this conscious human that was aware of having this first chakra power and development and individual selfhood that when I looked at everyone else around him, meaning the non-athlete, because he was similar to some of these other world-class sprinters, right? They all had that going.
Yeah.
But when I looked at the rest of us, including myself, not only, in the same way that like my legs and everyone else's legs look like these little like pathetic toothpicks compared to these guys' legs,
Yeah.
It, like energetically, it seemed the same way. It was like we were all kind of these collapsed first chakra, needy, projective, grasping the physical world around us, but then sort of acting like we were just as mature and powerful and individuated as those guys in our first chakras. And it was like, no, it was like we were the Mr. Burns,
Yeah.
In our first chakras, that how Mr. Burns, like if he drops a pencil, he needs Smithers to like pick it up.
Yeah, so he doesn't break his arm.
Right. So it seemed like that this development, this power, this sense of containment, this sense of their field, being this generator as opposed to this energy suck.
Yeah.
And just like, a certain sense of, wow, that not only does that seem super functional, but you know, to the extent that I could empathically attune to it, it's like, wow, there's a real, most importantly, there was such a sense of beingness in it. And what I mean is embodied soul embodiment in the first chakra. It wasn't just power. It was like, just like with a horse. I mean, you look at the horse and it's different than, because you can look at a tank and it's like, damn, that tank is badass. You know, that tank seems super powerful. It seems super rugged. You can shoot a gun at it and the bullets just bounce off. Like, that thing's
quite a tank.
It's got these big, what do you call it? The big
treads
and stuff. Yeah. But it's like, but there's no beingness, right? It's a tank. It's a robot. Whereas the horse, in addition to being this big, magnificent, strong, you know, physical matter, you also feel, and you know, when you look at the eyes of that horse, and it's like, whoa, there's a being in there.
Yeah.
There's an entity that is embodying that tissue and embodying that energetic field. And it brings, you know, and I think that in general it brings you know, a certain reverence and awe to people who see horses in that way.
Yeah.
And certainly people who love horses, you know what I mean? I think they kind of profoundly relate to that versus seeing horses as objects. And, you know, and of course there's all this conflict that comes up, because like you can look at a cow and you see that same kind of beingness, you know, in that beautiful eyeball of the cow. And you see, oh my God, there's a being in there. And then simultaneously it's like, fuck, you know, I eat those things, you know? Yeah. And if that feels awful and weird, and it's like, okay, what do you do with that? And is that right or wrong? And it's like, that's some whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But so to answer your question, it's like, I see in Marlon Brando, I don't just see a temper tantrum throwing idiot, which I think he did that a lot. You know, when you read about him or watch documentaries or something. But you sense this being in there. You know? And when Frank Sinatra sings, you know, I think in general he was a borderline personality.
It's like you don't have to look as far. Like we talk about, to see the being. Like we talk about somebody who's just like in this like marionette mode, and like there's just this tiny little being like somewhere in there, but most of it's just flailing around, versus like some kind of generative embodiment of that soul. It's easier, it shows up sooner. Yeah. And so then like you're drawn to that. Like there's a pull to that. And it's not just like charisma.
Yeah.
I think charisma gets like associated with that, or like it's not, you know, both can be there, but it's not the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And obviously you can have beingness and not be big and powerful. And I'm not trying
to.
You know, you hear, you know, like I hear it in Sinatra. I think you hear it in Elvis. I think, and it's just, I think in general, I hear like Adele. It's like, I'm not a huge Adele fan. I'm not a huge fan of that particular style of music or her particular whatever, but I can tell like, oh damn, there's a presence there. You know, there's this big presence, you know, or a Whitney Houston, or it's just like, wow, there's that similar, like objectively it's great. Just like Carl Lewis is sprinting, you know, whatever, but there's people that are just as present that aren't sprinters.
Yeah.
but so there's the actual development of the chakra, there's the actual ego maturity, but then there's also the embodiment. And the embodiment is what it's what I feel. I think it's what anyone feels most moved by when you notice that. Whatever your politics are, I think Barack Obama, when he's orating, there's a certain power and presence in him, and but then it's like, and as there was in Hitler, and then I think then you could get more into that conversation about to what extent was it charisma, versus consciousness. And in general, I'd say Obama's more conscious and Hitler's more charisma. But right, so that sense of chakra development, which is different than embodiment in that chakra, but they relate with each other, obviously. And my understanding is that the full development and embodiment in the heart chakra, or it's more complicated than that because there's something in the head with it, but at least the idea of Christ was that.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it becomes super cool and fascinating, and in a way, I guess it's what everyone's always doing anyway. But for me to think about it in those terms, and then to look at different people, and to feel these different energies, and to let myself be impacted at these different levels, and because I think it's huge. I think when you let yourself, in the same way that if you can sit and hear music, and this gets back to some of our conversations about receptivity and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If you let yourself be vibrated, and then of course it's like, well, to where and which energy center and to what level, it's all complicated. But if you just say, if you let yourself be moved, if you let yourself be vibrated by life, by a flower, by a song, by the energetic field of an other, whether that's an animal or whether a human, then your system is impacted by that, and your system then develops more. Your system opens out more. Your system, and then that is the interaction of life. And we're capable of really shutting off those interactions in various ways. As far as wanting to go interact with various gurus, I would love, of course, the idea of super awakened, super spiritual, super Christ-like, super loving, super open heart chakra. That all sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sure. But then also even, but I think it occurs all the way down, where to be in awe of, even you look at a photograph in sort of the stereotype back in the 70s and 80s was like, you look at a picture in National Geographic, and it's some person that lives in this very primitive tribal culture, but it's like God, there's something deep and profound and wise, and in these people's eyes, that there's an awareness of like, what the hell are we doing? They seem more alive, they seem more embodied, they seem more grounded, they seem more deep, they seem more in touch with death, they seem more in touch with the infinite ground of the universe than the society I'm living in. Seems more, it starts to seem, just like I've said, I grew up 15 minutes from Disneyland, and I've been to Disneyland a couple hundred times in my life or more. And, you walk in Disneyland and it's an artificial environment, and there's an awareness of that. Every shrub is carved to look like Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck, and
Yeah.
it's all these little man-made worlds to go into, right? Like Disneyland itself is this artificial world, and then within Disneyland you go into this world and you go into that world and you go into this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was amazing and awesome and cool, but if you'd lived in Disneyland and never came out, and then you come out of Disneyland and into the for example, even just into the mean streets of
Anaheim,
LA, and Anaheim. Yeah. It's like you're gonna have a rude awakening.
Yeah.
And you and I have grown up in Disneyland in a way that much of in the past, certainly no one grew up in this, and even now in various parts of it's all gradations, but
yeah, there's just like assumptions that we get to make about things that aren't true, and then we never even have to find out they aren't true.
Right.
And it's where this whole, it's like if you are, if you grew up in a culture where you have to be, let's say 80 years ago, more physically developed, more aware of you're talking about the isolation. It's also like a separateness that you have to acknowledge sooner. But if you're identified, it's also a separateness that's more obvious, because like if you're more identified with your physical self relative to your physical surroundings, it's easier to differentiate your physical self from another person's physical self. So we've stopped developing our physical selves. We don't know where that starts and ends. We're obsessed with our mental identification, where it's even murkier where self and other ends. And then we're making all these assumptions about other people based on our projections. So like there's like the Disney World, the Disneyland you're talking about is like it's going on constantly. We just keep bringing Disneyland around with us.
Yeah.
Right. There's the assumption we're making about those lower levels of development is not happening, is making it more and more difficult to differentiate and to experience that aloneness that you're talking about, and that isolation of what self really is, or an aspect of self.
I don't know what we're supposed to do about it, in the same way, like I don't think we're supposed to all go back to growing our own food,
Yeah.
Even if that was somehow possible, I don't think that's ideal. But I don't know what is ideal. I don't know how do we continue to I mean obviously child raising is huge, and I think the same thing that Steiner was talking about with Waldorf education, right? He's like, look, don't bombard these kids with cognitive tasks and teaching when they're still developing their first and second chakras.
Yeah.
Because they'll just start orienting from their third chakra or from their cognitive mental self, and they won't develop the way they ideally would in their bodies and in their lower chakras.
Yeah.
And there's obviously, it seems like there's some real wisdom to that. Let the person develop in these other ways. And so that's huge. But I don't, even then, it's like, to what extent is it even possible? I don't know. It's like, I don't really know where it's going. I don't know what it looks like from here, because it seems like it looks like we're all headed towards being Mr. Burns.
Yeah.
And instead of having Smithers, we're just going to have robots. Right?
Name Smithers.
Yeah.
But at the same time, again, there's like a countercultural reaction to the very thing you're talking about. Like there are like physical and like ideological reactions to our seeming disidentification with our physical selves, but they just like they get like the language of them makes them seem like they can just be dismissed, because they'll talk about like the like they're putting hormones in the vaccines or whatever. Like they're trying to emasculate the nation. They're trying to, like, all these things that I think they're reacting to what you're talking about. Like that there's masculine traits are being like less valued. So it seems like it's a need people are calling out. They just don't know what the real problem is.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. And that yeah, that there is that calling out, that backlash. I mean, if nothing else, I just feel like the education around it should be, you know, to the extent that I'm thinking I've gotten a certain amount of education about it, with regard to levels of consciousness, with regard to the psyche, how it works, how it goes in and out of different states, how there's different levels of development, how self and other and what's right and wrong is variable depending on the state you're in and the level you're at. Like even what I just rattled off, most of the world is not operating.
Yeah.
And at least we all need to be a little more aware of that.
Yeah.
Which again is generally your second tier consciousness versus first tier consciousness. If you use Wilbur stuff, and you can't just force second tier consciousness on everybody. So, but I do think that there's some kind of, like you were saying with what was the term that in Buddhism you said when it's a group?
Sangha.
The Sangha. Yeah, I think there is that somehow generally in the world that the population as a whole or much of it, when you get enough the 100th monkey kind of thing, or when you get enough people, that there is this like new level that that people start to kind of orient to, or at least obey, even if they're not quite awake there in the same way that now versus 500 years ago, or like there seems to be a level of consciousness that we all just kind of assume that it seems like wasn't quite as accessible back then.
There's something there. Like it just feels, there's like I think you said last time, and I don't know how it relates yet, but you're talking about kind of like our original state being psychotic, and then schizophrenic, paranoid, narcissistic, and then this shift we go through in relation to environment, where the self is no longer located as the thing that's overwhelmed, but becomes the thing that's overwhelming it.
Say that one more time.
You said that we experience a shift in relation to our environment.
Say what I said one more time.
Yeah. Let me run you by you real quick.
Okay.
There's a shift in relation to our environment where the self is no longer located as the thing that's being overwhelmed. The self becomes the world that's overwhelming it.
Yeah.
And
that's genius. Who said that?
It's Lance Hauge. How do you say it?
It's Hauge.
Okay, God. I was like, don't fuck with me. I swear.
I answer to almost anything that starts with an H.
Yeah, that's fair, but I try to learn names. It's just that I try. And then if there was one I like after all this time was messing up, I would feel bad. Our mind shifts and anchors in the thing that's overwhelming us. So like we're making these leaps you're talking about, or like these cultural shifts in what we're orienting to or obeying collectively.
Yeah.
But I don't think that thing necessarily, like, are we like reaching a point that thing is inherently destabilizing? Especially if there's no development before it.
So if I'm hearing you right, you're saying, okay, we're like sort of reaching up, trying to do this thing, kind of like the the 16-year-old that starts deciding they don't need their parents anymore because they got it all figured out. And so they're trying to be this like fully autonomous human, but like it's not sustainable because they're not really ready to go get a job or make their own money or clean their own house. So they kind of inevitably crash back down to needing their parents and going back down and doing some more necessary development. Is that?
Yeah. Yep.
And so then on a global scale, what perhaps if we were going to do that over the next 50 years, what does that look like? We kind of come back down, and then because there's a certain way, and this is, huge generalizations and stuff, but you can just look at like the energy situation, and it's like, there's all these high-minded ideas about alternative fuels, but in what way do we have to kind of come back down and say, look, we're using fossil fuels for the next,
right.
And maybe we can, in however many years we can find a different way to do it or something, but we're going to sink our whole ship if we just suddenly outlawed combustion engines or something, right?
Yeah.
And some more understanding that, okay, look, we're not going completely alternative in 10 years. We're not, and at the same time, are we being accurate about, is the world going to come to an end in 10 years if we don't? Like I have no idea. You hear all these different,
right.
But all this stuff's kind of in that range, right?
Yeah.
Or you hear that, like, have you heard all this stuff about how in the huge agricultural producing areas of the world, there are restrictions being put on them, for example, around nitrogen levels that are going to inhibit production to the extent that it's going to cause massive starvation. But it's in the name of environmental, protection.
No, I hadn't heard about that.
And it's like, I don't fucking know if there's any truth to that or not, but I understand the idea, and I think it's possible, that there's a high-minded idea of let's just put some restrictions on here that are really gonna make a change. And it's like, but wait, what's the cascade of effects that? Just like you could say, look, antibiotics, it turns out it depletes the flora in your intestine, and so let's just outlaw antibiotics. And it's like, well, wait, there's a bunch of good stuff antibiotics do that we don't want to
do away with.
So am I off track, or is that the
general? No, I think you're right. It's like, what are there's symptoms to the thing I'm talking about, and it's like, how do we actually treat what's going on without like miscategorizing a symptom for a cause? Or I think it's like, how do we? It's like, if the human experience is an analogy for the culture, it's like, if you go up into the head and forget the body, like you're done eventually. So like culturally, if we like go up into our heads and like forget all the things that like are holding us up there, and like we're done. So like eventually, like but at the same time, it's like going up and like taking a piece back down. Like there's just like there's no like room for letting the top fray a bit while like the root strengthens. Like if we're going to go up culturally into this place that's going to make us destabilize us and make us realize how incoherent our current way of like being is, there's no safety net for like a whole bunch of people. Like if those 100 monkeys do that, like there's no cultural safety net for that.
Is there a way to create one?
Right. That's what I think. Yeah, I don't know. It's like the language around uh like outliers. Like we're creating we're creating more and more specific end groups without like some underlying like broader group. And like we're breaking into factions in a way that like totally dismisses an earlier form of identity. So even if it was just like your city, right? Like there's the conservative people in my city and the liberal people in my city, and like they can't coexist, right? But like there's no, I think like a broader collective identity would be like a safety net to the destabilization of a consciousness shift.
Yeah.
It's hard because it just feels so cliche and frustrating because like it's not like a new thing anyone's like been trying to figure out, but it does seem like this people want to, I think people get to a point they want to connect back to what you're talking about, but like they just instead they don't know how, or they get sold something that's like, well, just keep talking and thinking about it. There's a disconnect from feeling, or a disconnect from your individual experience if it doesn't match up with the group that you think you're supposed to be identified with. There's no room for like the mythic or the archetypal or these things that are bigger and broader and like more real than, you know, which icon is next to your Twitter handle. Like it's like we're just the example you're talking about, like I have a great life, but this is what I wish was different. Right? Like we don't like meet each other there because of this like need to there's so many different things to it, but like I'm just talking about like the humanness, or like there's just like the level I'm talking about is like human, and like what being a human isn't like a shared belief or a shared understanding. When you talk about like a culture that seems more connected and more like vibrant in a way that we're not, like there's a level of like shared beingness at like either a tribal or a cultural level that like we're losing by becoming hyper identified with some tiny aspect of, you know, a projected persona. And like to get back to that beingness that like you see in the eyes of a cow, like well, you could see that in a person, but like the number of layers you have to look through to see that is like heartbreaking. And it's like we keep enforcing each other's layers between like self and like other. So it's like the way you build that is like stop fucking doing that. Like
Yeah, that's really good. I like the way you laid that out, and I think that's really important. And like you're saying, conceptually, most people would say, "Well, yeah, of course," and that's what I do.
yeah,
You know, I just wish everyone else would start doing that.
yeah, that's me in this moment. That's
But I think you're right. I think that those layers, yeah, that even the people that see it different, or they're at different levels, both to see the humanness in them, and then also to see that you got to, you know, you're just operating via a bunch of layers,
yeah,
and that those layers aren't necessarily truth, or they're not the whole truth. Like which again is generally second tier type of
yeah.
awareness, right?
But we're not even embodying those layers.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's what's kind of fun too, is like you dig down through that, and then you have like I'm sure you gotta end soon. But like you dig down through that, and then you can kind of like begin to feel the actual identity there. And it's like better than unconsciously just putting that up as the wall between you and the world. Like even if it's just some characteristic that you're unconsciously like living out, you become aware of that and like more embodied in it, and it's more present there, even just doing the same thing you would normally do. Like we're like chasing something the long way around. No, I think I lost my train of thought, but
I like it though. I think let's pick this up again.
okay. I want to talk more about that thing too that you said that you didn't remember you said about anchoring in the thing that overwhelms us.
Hmm.
It's just like the entire arc of your life.
Right.
Like that's
Right.
just you said it last time. It was just like there's something absurdly profound and impossible, but it just felt like one of those like it's one of those coin flips. Like
Yeah.
you're the other side of that coin too.
Right.
If you want to learn more about the Dimension Approach, please visit dimensionapproach.com.